What Should I Do with My Life by Po Bronson. Picture yourself at 17, trying to figure out the world and yourself. Life swirls with vague notions, confusing pressures, and one persistent question: what am I supposed to do with all of this? Now imagine a letter arrives in the mail, signed by someone you trust completely, someone with a direct line to the universe's ultimate meaning, perhaps the Dalai Lama himself. You open it, and it tells you exactly who you are and what your true destiny is. It says, don't worry about becoming a doctor or a farmer or a businessman. We have a spot picked out for you. We're looking for a great spiritual leader, no experience necessary. Wouldn't that make things easier? To have a letter in your pocket. Something to pull out whenever you felt lost. To remind you, oh right, that's who I am. Well, a young man named Chuaor Dondup, everyone called him Ali, actually received such a letter. He was 17, living in a refugee camp in India, mostly thinking about soccer and his girlfriend. Then the letter arrived from the Dalai Lama, telling him he wasn't Ali after all. He was Za Rinpoche, the reincarnation of a great warrior monk, a spiritual king. His destiny was to lead thousands. You'd think his search was over, but it had only just begun. The first thing Ali thought was, am I going to have to cut my hair? And am I going to have to give up sex? Even when your destiny arrives in the mail, you still have to choose it. You still have to struggle with it. And that's the journey we're going on today. We're diving into a remarkable book by Po Bronson titled, What Should I Do with My Life? This isn't just another career guide. Bronson, feeling lost in his own life, set out on an incredible journey across America. He didn't consult experts or study old philosophies in a library. Instead, he talked to people, ordinary people. He listened to over 900 stories from those who had dared to ask this question seriously. People who broke away from the chorus to learn the sound of their own voice. What he discovered is that the biggest obstacle to finding our way isn't a lack of options, but a lack of permission. We don't give ourselves permission to take the question seriously. So today I promise you we'll do just that. This is a safe place for that discussion. By the end of our time together, you'll have listened in on some of the most honest conversations about what it truly means to find your place in the world. And you'll learn that the answer isn't about finding a perfect job. It's about finding the courage to be honest with yourself. It seems like the great philosophical questions, who am I, why am I here, have been repackaged for our modern times. The question we wrestle with now is a little more pragmatic, a little more urgent. What should I do with my life? We ask it every time we graduate, get laid off, or move to a new city. It's the question that sits at the intersection of who we are and what we do. And answering it, truly answering it, is how we protect ourselves from being shaped into someone we're not. Po Bronson found that our journey to answer this question is often blocked by a series of powerful misconceptions and deeply rooted fears. Our fears create stories about why we can't change, and we start to believe those stories are true. So let's begin by exploring one of the most seductive ideas of all, the idea of destiny. We all secretly wish for it, don't we? That feeling that our life's purpose will be revealed to us by some higher power, a cosmic sign that points the way. We met Ali, the young man whose destiny arrived in a letter from the Dalai Lama. He was told he was Za Rinpoche, the Dharma King. It sounds like the perfect answer, a shortcut through all the confusion. But even for Ali, it wasn't easy. He had to give up his old life, his long hair, his girlfriend, and enter a monastery with 4,000 monks. For years he doubted himself. And even after he accepted his role, he had to fight for his independence, to find a way to be a spiritual leader on his own terms, not just the terms laid out for him. He once told Bronson, I wish I could be ordinary sometimes. Even when destiny is handed to you on a silver platter, you still have to go out and find it for yourself. Sometimes destiny doesn't arrive in the mail. Sometimes it feels like it's hunting you. Consider the story of Janelle London. She was a lawyer with a self-described boring life, waiting for a cause to fall into her lap. Then, on a trip to Barcelona, her body began to fail. She was tired all the time, her fingers cramped and swelled, but she dismissed it. Finally, she ended up in an emergency room, where doctors discovered her kidneys had completely shut down. It was a terrifying, life-altering event. Suddenly, her old life as a corporate lawyer felt intolerable. While on the long waiting list for a transplant, she realized her cause had found her: organ donation activism. It seems like a perfect story. Tragedy strikes, a calling is revealed, a life is changed. But here's where the human soul resists simple stories. Janelle didn't quit her job right away. In fact, she stayed for 7 more years. And even after she finally devoted herself to the cause, she was offered her dream job, a high-paying position as executive director for the National Kidney Foundation, and she turned it down. Why? She told Bronson she didn't want to settle, that the job wasn't a perfect fit. She was holding out for something more. It sounded like she was pushing her destiny away yet again. But the truth was more complicated. Janelle's mother had also lost a kidney when Janelle was a teenager, a trauma she had pushed out of her mind. Her destiny, it seemed, had been stalking her for years, but taking that job meant confronting the pain of her own illness every single day, seeing it reflected in the faces of every patient she met. She wasn't pushing away her calling. She was pushing away the memory of her own trauma. It's a powerful reminder that our paths are never as straightforward as they seem from the outside. Our hearts and our histories have a say in the matter. Sometimes, the destiny we think we have is the very thing we need to let go of. Jessica Grossman grew up idolizing her father, a famous and passionate cardiologist. From the time she was a little girl, all she ever wanted was to practice medicine. It was her calling, her destiny. She chose to become an obstetrician and gynecologist. She loved the adrenaline, the intensity, the joy of bringing new life into the world. But the reality of 130-hour work weeks and the immense emotional toll began to wear her down. The problem wasn't the work itself. It was what she learned about herself. "I don't have an off switch," she told Bronson. She cried with her patients, gave them her home phone number against hospital rules, and took every unwanted shift because she couldn't say no. She was giving everything, leaving nothing for herself. She realized she either had to learn to build boundaries, to care only so much, or she had to find work that didn't ask for her soul. "I don't want to be a person who cares only so much," she said, "who has to communicate to people, 'Okay, you've used up your 5 minutes of love.' No, that's not the kind of person I want to be." And so she walked away, not just from a job, but from her entire life's identity. "I'm going to miss thinking I had a destiny," she confessed. "I'm going to miss that certainty." She felt like a total failure. But Bronson offered her a different way to see it. He said, "If the purpose of life is to be as great a doctor as your father, then you might have stalled. But if the purpose of life is to be true to yourself, when you walked out of that hospital, you passed your first big test." This is a profound shift in perspective. The goal isn't just to find a path, but to find a path that allows you to be the person you truly want to be. And sometimes, the most courageous act is admitting that the path you're on, even one you thought was your destiny, is turning you into someone you're not. But letting go of a path, especially a successful one, brings up one of the most common fears Bronson encountered: the fear of being impractical. Marcella Widrig was the definition of practical. Her passion was cultural studies, but she knew the jobs were in business. So she earned a business degree, became fluent in 3 languages, and landed her dream job in international sales, based in Barcelona. She loved it. She was interacting with different cultures, learning their styles of negotiation, and building real human connections. But then, the internet economy changed everything. The ethos became speed. Deals were done over email. All the human contact, all the cultural richness, was gone. The work became uninteresting. Marcella didn't recognize this at first. She just felt constant fatigue, insomnia, and migraines. She had this fantasy of studying bodywork with a guru in Switzerland, but it seemed so impractical, so hokey. She was a business professional, after all. But she allowed the fantasy to become a hobby. taking massage classes on weekends. Still, she was afraid to quit her job. Financial stability was her baseline. Could she really make a living doing body work? She kept saving just one more $1,000, stuck like a hamster on a wheel, until one day, fate intervened. Her company went under, and she was laid off. This was her chance. But when she tried to give away free 10-minute massages, she was so scared that customers could sense it. No one signed up to be a paying client. Her fear was like a 20-pound watermelon she was carrying in her arms. You can't give a good hug, you can't connect with people when you're holding a giant watermelon. She had to learn to put the watermelon down. She had to embrace her fear, to acknowledge the terrible dread she felt, and say back to it, "Oh no, you're not going to stop me." Once she refused to grant her fear that power, everything changed. The clients started rolling in. She had found a way to connect with people that was even more powerful and genuine than her old dream job. Another deep-seated fear is the one that tells us we don't belong. This is the fear that we're an imposter, a hick who's wandered into a world of sophisticated people who all know a secret language we were never taught. Bart Hanford lived with this fear. A year before he joined the Clinton White House, he was working the night shift at a Conagra chicken fingers plant in Arkansas, standing in 120-degree heat, dumping sweat out of his rubber boots every couple of hours. He was from a working-class family and didn't see the point of college. But that job sent him back to school. He signed up for political science, not because he planned to go into politics, but because he just needed a degree to get a desk job. Then, his life changed. He was in a horrific accident, hit by a freight train, and spent a year rehabilitating. When he could finally work again, he took a job at a Little Caesars pizza place, and for a second income, he applied for a job answering phones at the Clinton campaign headquarters. Suddenly, he was surrounded by volunteers from elite schools, all doing grunt work for 18 hours a day, not for money, but because they believed in something. He described it using an old story. 3 men are laying bricks. When asked what they're doing, the first says, "I'm earning a wage." The second says, "I'm supporting my family." The third says, "I'm helping to build a cathedral." For the first time in his life, Bart felt like he was building a cathedral. He had found his home. He ended up in Washington, D.C., working for the White House and later the Department of Agriculture, fighting to bring clean water to rural communities. He had found his cause. But when the administration changed and he was out of a job, that old fear came roaring back. He knew he needed an MBA to advance in the world of policy, but when he looked at the applications for top schools, he froze. I would be writing and thinking, "These people are never going to let a hick like me into their school," he admitted. For 8 years he had worked at the center of power, but he still felt like an outsider who didn't belong. This feeling of being an imposter, this inferiority complex, paralyzed him from taking the next step. It's a feeling that cripples so many of us. We achieve something, but we secretly believe we don't deserve it, that we were just lucky. This fear, the fear that we don't belong, can be just as powerful as the fear of being impractical. Perhaps the most paralyzing fear of all is the fear of irreversibility. It's the belief that if we make a bold choice, a resume-killing choice, we'll slam a lot of doors shut forever. It feels like a one-way ticket. Could there be a bigger leap than going from being a Harvard MBA and an investment banker at a top Wall Street firm to becoming a catfish farmer in the Mississippi Delta? That's exactly what Don Lin did. Don was a successful banker in Dallas, but the business had become predatory. He was ordered to push deals on clients that he knew were unethical, deals that would likely ruin them. But the final push didn't come from an ethical crisis. It became personal. He was traveling so much, working such long hours, that when he came home, his baby son, who was just learning to walk, would cry when he picked him up. His own son saw him as a stranger. In that moment, Don knew he was done. No more, he decided. His wife's family owned a farm in Mississippi that had been passed down for generations. They needed someone to manage it, or they'd have to sell. Don, who had never considered anything like it, volunteered. He knew it looked like a crazy step down. He was aware his business school classmates would think he'd lost his mind. He expected it to be the last stop, that he'd be buried in the family plot in the backyard. Life on the farm was a completely different world. The adrenaline came not from closing big deals, but from managing a complex operation against the whims of nature. He had to learn about soil, weather, and the delicate chemistry of keeping 10,000 catfish per acre alive and breathing on a hot summer night. It was a classic resource optimization problem, but with real-world stakes. He wasn't just moving numbers on a screen, he was growing things. And he became good at it. He saved the local catfish cooperative from financial ruin, and he created elder care facilities for the community. For years, that was his life. A one-way ticket, just as he'd feared. But then, the family decided to sell the farm. Don's job was ending. He was scared of the uncertainty. You would think that a former banker-turned-farmer would have nowhere to go. But a funny thing happened. Over those years in Mississippi, Don had become an expert in something new and valuable: transgenic foodstuffs. He had used genetically engineered seeds and new types of feed. He had read all the research. Suddenly, biotech startups were interested in him. They needed a business manager who understood what farmers wanted, who had walked in their shoes. That crazy, irreversible leap turned out to be the perfect stepping stone to the next new thing. As Don said, you close one door behind you and inevitably another opens up in front. His story teaches us that the strategy of always trying to keep your options open can be a trap. Sometimes, the most unconventional path is the one that leads to the most unique and valuable destination. Our motivations are often tangled, and sometimes we're driven by a deep-seated need to impress other people. But what happens when the people we're trying to impress are the very ones who've disrespected us? Tim Bratcher was a lawyer from a place he called Hoodoo Holler, a world of outhouses and scant pavement. He was a towering 6'7", but carried a huge chip on his shoulder. His life had been a series of failures followed by rebounds, where he fought with a vengeance to show everyone they were wrong about him. After a screw-up in college, he joined the military and came back to get perfect grades for 7 straight semesters. When the university reprimanded him unfairly, he vowed to become a lawyer and fight for justice. He graduated near the top of his class and was hired by a prestigious firm that normally only recruited from Harvard and Yale. He was on his way. Then he moved to Silicon Valley, to an even more prestigious firm, Cooley Godward, but they gave him what he called the small-town discount, deducting 2 years from his experience and salary. He never got over the disrespect. His work suffered, he made no friends, and in less than a year, he was asked to leave. Bronson met him right after this, and Tim was in a dark place, convinced he was a failure. He was torturing himself, but he couldn't leave the valley. He had to prove Cooley wrong. Bronson told him about a concept from C.S. Lewis, the fallacy of the inner circle. We all have an imaginary table in our minds, an inner circle of people whose approval we seek. Everything we do is filtered through their eyes. For Tim, that table was filled with all the people who had ever disrespected him, the partners at Cooley, the administrator from his university hearing. He was living his life to win a game against people he didn't even like. Bronson gave him some advice. If you're stuck on impressing people, at least impress people you like and admire, rather than people you hate. This meant getting out of Silicon Valley, an environment he despised. He had to break the cycle. Tim fantasized about being a civil rights lawyer, the very reason he went to law school. But he had gotten sucked into the corporate world because it felt good to be wanted and praised. His anger over that old reprimand was fuel, but he was using it to power the wrong engine. The first step was simply to leave, to get out of a toxic environment where he couldn't sort out the real him. He took a job in Atlanta, where the sound of Southern accents felt like home. He was instantly happier. He was still trying to impress people, but now they were people he liked and respected. Atlanta wasn't the final answer, but it was a better place to figure out the next steps. It was a place where he could finally start to dismantle that inner circle and build a new one. So we've talked about destiny and the fears that hold us back. But how do you actually find your path? Sometimes the answer is so close, we can't see it. In fact, sometimes it's hiding right under the bed. Noah Goldfader was 30 years old, unemployed, and desperate. In 8 years, he'd had at least 16 different entry-level jobs in 6 cities. He was no slacker. He would happily work 16-hour days if he only knew what he should be doing. I sure as hell don't want to be one of those people who dies with the music still inside them, he agonized. I wish I could find what the hell I was put on this earth to do. He was a sports nut, and he idolized people like the basketball commentator Dick Vitale, who was so passionate he could be locked in a gym for 16 hours and never look at his watch. Do you think everybody gets a passion? He asked Bronson, desperate for an answer. Bronson told him something crucial. I think the depth of your struggling is the sign there's something there, something in you that's trying to get out. People who don't have passions don't struggle. That blank urge, that feeling of a vacuum, is the call. Noah was listening intently, and Bronson shared another story about how skills learned in one area can be tools for another. His own brother had honed his gift with people in sales, a job he didn't love, and then brought that very same gift to nursing, a job he adored. Noah's face lit up. That's what I want to do, he blurted out. Bronson was confused. You want to become a nurse? No, Noah said. I want to help people play better golf. It turned out that Noah loved golf more than anything, but every time he'd ever mentioned it as a career, someone had shot him down. A rabbi, a famous career counselor. They'd dismissed it as being beneath someone with a college degree, so he had never allowed himself to take it seriously. Bronson asked him to show him something, and Noah went into his bedroom, reached under his bed, and pulled out 2 handcrafted gizmos, a swing trainer and a newfangled putter grip he had invented. For 8 years, he had been searching the country for his passion, and the whole time, it was literally under his bed. The journey to find our path often involves working with the material life has given us, even the parts we'd rather forget. Po Bronson shares his own story, a raw and honest account of one of his first jobs out of college. He worked for a litigation consulting firm in a windowless room, where his only job, for 10 to 11 hours a day, 6 days a week, was to use a 10-key calculator to add up columns of numbers on spreadsheets to make sure the computer hadn't made a rounding error. Everyone pretended the work was important, and the pretending was the worst part. He was so miserable he started crying into his pillow at night. To save money on lunch, he would mix packets of sugar-free hot cocoa mix with a little water to make a pudding. He was withering away, both metaphorically and literally. He lost 25 pounds. He was desperate for an escape, for something to hope for. That hope came in the form of a crazy, small-time pipe dream, designing absurdist cartoon greeting cards with his girlfriend. This is where the story takes a turn. He started running the greeting card company out of the back of that same windowless room. He called it parasite, entrepreneurism, leeching off his employer's phones and copiers to build his own little business. This tiny act of rebellion, this vessel of hope, gave him the strength to eventually quit. The card company didn't last long, but that wasn't the point. The point was that this awful, soul-crushing experience became the material for his future. Years later, it became the first story he ever told as it really happened, the story that helped him find his true voice as a writer. We all have passions if we're willing to see them, but we have to look backward as much as we look forward. And we have to accept our lives for what they were, not what we wished they had been. But what if you try to think your way to the answer? Can you create a formula for finding your passion? Lori Gottlieb tried exactly that. After leaving a successful but unfulfilling career as a Hollywood executive, she was determined not to make another mistake. She gave herself 3 years to figure it out. She analyzed her childhood diaries, took classes, interviewed people, and filled out every exercise in What Color Is Your Parachute? She broke every job down into its skill sets and mapped them against her innate talents. She distilled it all down to one essential quality. Her answer had to provide brain candy. She realized her mind loved solving puzzles. So who solves puzzles for a living? Doctors. She did her homework, observed surgeons on their rounds, and enrolled in pre-med classes. Organic chemistry was a dream come true. Endorphins flooded her bloodstream. This was it. She was so convinced that a national magazine wrote an article about her journey, holding her up as an inspiration. The woman who loved solving puzzles had solved the biggest puzzle of all: where she belonged. And then she dropped out of Stanford Medical School after only 2.5 months. What went wrong? Well, she told Bronson, "I forgot that I was going to have to deal with sick people." It seems absurd, but it reveals a profound lesson. Lori had been so focused on the intellectual stimulation, the brain candy, that she'd overlooked the human reality of the job. She had been chasing excitement, but Bronson came to realize that those who find their place don't talk about 24-hour highs. They talk about their work being meaningful, significant, and fulfilling. The world, especially for our generation, can seem like a battle between the boring and the stimulating. We channel surf through jobs and relationships, hitting the button at the first sign of slowing down. But there's a huge difference between something that stimulates you for a year and something you can be passionate about for 10 years. The relevant question is not what you will do, but who you will become. Chasing brain candy is not enough. You have to find something that connects to you emotionally and deeply. Finding our way isn't just an internal journey. The environment we're in, and the people we're surrounded by, have a powerful effect on our ambition and our sense of what's possible. Bronson explored the city of New Orleans, a place that people move to when they feel their ambition is running too high, like an engine burning too much oil. It's a place where free time is more valuable than money, and where a dream doesn't have to become a reality to be real. Mark Weidenbaum, a former editor-in-chief from San Francisco, moved to New Orleans to escape the get-rich-quick mentality. He learned to talk slower, to enjoy the stroll to get his newspaper, and to accept that it doesn't take much money to get by. The city calmed his mind. In New York or San Francisco, culture was something to be consumed for status. In New Orleans, people just lived their lives. The laid-back environment helped him find his own course. But for others, that same environment can be a trap. Julia Kamish Lane fled to New Orleans to escape her own demons. She was a driven workaholic, fiercely competitive, but deeply unhappy. The pressure she put on herself had led to a breakdown in college. In New Orleans, she could be a writer without the pressure to be a successful writer. The city's culture, where you can't fail, because even to try is legitimate, was the safe haven she needed to finally face her dream. The environment we choose can either amplify our anxieties or give us the space to heal them. This leads to one of the most powerful forces in shaping our journey, the benefit of being around like-minded people. Bronson shares his story of starting the writer's grotto. After leaving the world of finance, he knew he needed a community. He and 2 friends rented a dusty flat and created a place where they could simply go to work every day. It wasn't a formal school. It was just an environment where taking creative risks was okay. He said, "Nobody taught me these things. They were doing it and made it seem possible." Being surrounded by people who shared his ideals, who understood the struggle, who believed that a story accepted by a small journal was a monumental achievement, that was the lifeline that kept him going. The community makes success possible, not because everyone blindly believes in each other, but because it normalizes the struggle and makes the dream feel attainable. But creating or finding a new community often means leaving an old one behind. This can be painful for us and for the people we love. But as Bronson shows through story after story, from Rinpoche finding himself among ordinary people in Phoenix, to Tim Bratcher finding peace in Atlanta, to Bart Hanford finding his people at campaign headquarters, we have to put this power to work. We have to find the environment that supports the person we are trying to become. As we get closer to finding our true selves, our relationships, especially with family, often come into sharper focus. For many, the journey to answer "what should I do with my life?" is deeply intertwined with the journey of becoming a parent. Our generation is often wary of taking on responsibilities like children before we feel ready. We've seen our parents' midlife crises and we fear sacrificing our dreams. But Bronson found that becoming a parent isn't the dream killer we often imagine it to be. Instead, it can trigger a, meaning audit. The profound connection with the child can reveal just how meaningless other parts of our lives are, compelling us to hold a higher standard for how we spend our time. Kat Clark's story is a powerful testament to this. She was a phenomenal athlete, a shot put and discus thrower on track for the 1988 Olympics. She joined the Marines specifically to train for the Olympic trials. Then, just as she was about to make the All-Marine team, she found out she was 8 weeks pregnant. The baby or the Olympics? The choice, for her, was easy. She wanted the baby. She never regretted it. Her daughter, Marlena, became her world. 13 years later, Kat, now 32, went back to community college and, on a lark, joined the track team. She was stronger than ever, throwing farther than she had at 19. The dream was alive again. She could go for the 2004 Olympics. But this new commitment took all her time. She was working full-time, taking a full load of classes, and training 5 nights a week. She was never home. One day her daughter confronted her. "Mom, I am lonely." Kat was faced with the same choice again, and again she chose her daughter. She dropped the track team and her classes. But she didn't see it as a sacrifice. The fulfillment she got from being there for Marlena, from seeing her grades improve, was more real than any resentment. She came to see her daughter not as an obstacle to her dream, but as the greatest gift. "It's not for me to criticize or change the nature of this gift," she said. "My job is to accept it, as it is, whatever it brings." Sometimes, a child doesn't ask us to give up a dream, but instead helps us remember what's important. Rick Olson was a corporate lawyer, a mechanic, who was good at closing deals, but whose mind was always in 600 places at once. One Saturday, he took his 7-year-old son Patrick to the Incline in Pittsburgh, a tram that goes up Mount Washington for a spectacular view of the city. Rick had been there 100 times. But that day, seeing it through his son's eyes, he saw it for the first time. Patrick asked question after question, noticing details Rick had never seen in 22 years of living there. The experience had a profound effect on Rick. He realized he had never been 100% focused on his son. He had never been 100% focused on anything. He was always multitasking, and that created a permanent edginess, a skin of guilt and defensiveness that he wore every day. That day with Patrick was the beginning of the end of his legal career. A shattered ankle from a hockey game sealed the deal, giving him the chance to walk away without having to explain himself. He fell back on an old skill from a college summer job. He became a long-haul trucker. It might seem like an even more demanding job, but the difference was autonomy. The company told him where and when to deliver his load. The rest was up to him. He was no longer told how to do his job. He had a window seat with a view that changed every mile. And most importantly, when he came home, he was 100% there for Patrick. "He knows the difference," Rick said. "Patrick tells me all the time how much more he enjoys me now. Children don't always take things away. Sometimes, they give us back the part of ourselves we've lost." The hardest things in life are often the most liberating. Kurt Slauson learned this in the most painful way imaginable. Kurt was on track to become a professor of avant-garde poetry. It was his dream since he was 16. But as he got deeper into his PhD program, the passion was gone. He was suffocating, filled with dread, unable to write his thesis. He felt trapped, but didn't know how to get out. Then he got a call. His older brother, Todd, an outdoorsman who seemed to be living the dream life in Montana, had walked into the woods with a deer rifle and hadn't come back. After a 6-day search, they found his body. He had carved a note into the stock of the rifle with a penknife. sorry, can't hurt anyone anymore. Kurt was consumed by grief, but also by anger. He would drive around screaming at the ghost of his brother. You had other choices. You could have changed. You could have started over. And then one day, he turned that anger on himself. He realized he wasn't just yelling at Todd, he was yelling at himself. I can change. I can start over. I don't have to stick it out with poetry. His wife suggested he become a chef. It was a crazy idea, but it was a way out. He went to culinary school and found that the brutal, physical intensity of the kitchen was exactly what he needed. It squeezed his mind down to a peanut, giving him a break from the terribly sad thoughts that had preoccupied him. As Kurt said, changing my career saved my life. You tell people that, you put that in your book. Changing my career saved my life. But his healing wasn't complete. He was holding back, emotionally distant from his new life, his new home, even his baby daughter Maya. He confessed a secret, agonizing theory. He felt that his own successes, his marriage, his PhD, had made Todd feel like a failure and had contributed to his death. He felt that even now, his daughter's existence would be a fragile blow to his brother. He was blocked from fully loving his own child by a ghost of guilt. The path to healing for Kurt was realizing he had to give himself permission to enjoy the life he had earned. It wasn't a privilege handed to him. He had fought for every bit of it. He had to uncouple the birth of his daughter from the death of his brother, not just for himself but for her. He had a responsibility to love her completely, without a parachute of guilt dragging behind. The hardest things are the most liberating. Confronting that pain was the only way to be free. As we get older, we might think the time for big changes has passed. We start to believe it's too late to start over. But Bronson found stories that defy that logic. Sidney Ross was 70 years old, working as a barrister in London. But he hadn't always been a lawyer. For 27 years, he was a tenured professor of chemistry. It was a career he had fallen into through a daft choice, made out of personal pique, when he was just 13. He was bored and unfulfilled. At the age of 53, after being pushed into early retirement, he decided to listen to where his true talents lay. He enrolled in law school alongside students 30 years younger. When asked if he was afraid of starting over, of the loss of status, of failing, he simply said, "If I had those fears, I simply put them out of my mind." It wasn't an easy path. Despite graduating in the top of his class, he was rejected by 24 law chambers because of his age. But he persevered, endured the rejections and the humiliations, and eventually found his place. I hit the point where I knew I ought to do something while my faculties were still reasonably intact, he reflected, and not waste the rest of my life. His story is a powerful reminder that the timeline is our own. It's never too late, as long as you're willing to put your fears aside and do the work. Throughout this journey, it's essential to keep an eye on your own big picture, even if you can't quite define it yet. Bronson calls this Contribution X. It's the idea that you can build skills and experiences now that will prepare you for a future contribution you can't yet name. Phil Kaplan was living that idea. After working as President Clinton's staff secretary, one of the most powerful jobs in the White House, he made a surprising move. He left politics not for a lobbying job, but to become the personal COO for a founder of a hot investment bank. It was a job that required him to do anything his boss needed, from attending board meetings to picking up his dry cleaning. He did it because he knew he needed a business education. He saw his time in politics and his time in business as training, pieces that would one day add up to his own big picture, his contribution X, whether that was running for office or leading a company. He was keeping his eye on a goal that was 10, 20 years down the road. Joe Belanoff's journey shows how that big picture can come into focus over time. He was a successful Wall Street trader who, by his mid-20s, had started his own arbitrage firm. The goal was to get rich and get out. But he realized he didn't want to retire at 35. He wanted to find his life's work. At 31, he left Wall Street and went to medical school, eventually becoming a psychiatrist at Stanford. There, he was disturbed to find that the only treatment for a severe condition called psychotic depression was electroshock therapy. He and a colleague began to research a cure. They discovered that an old, overlooked cancer compound could be the key. The initial trials were miraculously successful. Joe faced another choice. He had promised himself he would never do business again. But he knew that the fastest way to get this drug to the thousands of patients who needed it was to start a company and do it himself. "I used to use business to make money," Joe said, "but I've learned that business is a tool. You can use it to support what you believe in." His big picture became saving 20,000 lives a year. Perhaps the most inspiring story of a big picture is that of Denis Leonard. A Native American from the Warm Springs Reservation, he was an anti-war activist in the 60s who was imprisoned for his beliefs. While fasting in the mountains, he had a vision for his life. He saw that the handout system was making his people dependent and stripping them of their identity. He realized that to save his people's ways, he had to first learn the white man's ways. He created a 20-year plan for himself. He would spend 5 years training in each of 4 different areas: education, business and banking, indigenous government, and international relations. And he did it. At the age of 46, he began to put his plan into action. He started an investment bank to build a parallel economy for Native American tribes, using tax advantages and government programs that were already in place but had been ignored. He built power plants on reservations, turning a cost into a source of revenue. He found a way to rejuvenate dried-up oil wells. He was turning dust into oil, land into power, and nickels into dollars. And all of it was designed to restore economic sovereignty, to bring jobs and pride back to the reservations, and to fund education for the next generation of leaders. His story is a testament to patience, long-term vision, and the incredible power that is unleashed when you embrace your true identity. It's a reminder that no big picture is too big. So after this journey through so many lives, what can we take away? If there is one central message in Po Bronson's work, it is this: the search for what you should do with your life is not a search for a job title. It's a search for a way to be yourself, a way to be honest with who you are and what you believe in. The stories in this book aren't neat and tidy. They are messy, full of wrong turns, painful setbacks, and moments of profound confusion. But that's the point. The journey is not a straight line. The failed attempts, the wasted years, they are not waste at all. They are the material from which we build our understanding of ourselves. They provide the contrast that makes our future answer so meaningful. We are often told to follow our passion, but Bronson's work reveals a deeper truth. Passion isn't some magical feeling that strikes us like lightning. It's something that grows out of deeply felt experiences. It's often rooted in our greatest wounds. John Butler, the once angry prosecutor, found his calling as a minister of forgiveness. Kurt Slauson, shattered by his brother's suicide, found healing in the brutal physical honesty of a chef's kitchen. Our pain can become our purpose if we have the courage to face it. So what can you do right now to begin this journey? You don't have to quit your life and move to a new country. The first steps are often much smaller. First, as Joe Olszewski's counselor advised him, simply go out into the world and watch what you naturally pay attention to. Don't judge it. Don't ask if it's practical. Just notice your own curiosity. It is a raw and genuine sign from deep inside, and it's worth following where it points. Second, have meaningful conversations. George Milano, after the chaos of the dot-com collapse, set a goal to have one meaningful conversation every day. Talk to people about their journeys, their struggles, their moments of clarity. You will be amazed at what you learn, and how much of yourself you see in their stories. And third, try an experiment. You don't have to violate the monkey law and let go of one vine before you've grabbed another. Just take one class. Volunteer for one afternoon. Spend a weekend learning a new skill. These small experiments are not about finding the final answer. They are about opening yourself up to possibilities, about learning the sound of your own voice, one note at a time. The rewards of this journey are not for everyone. They are only for those who are willing to listen attentively, to themselves and to others. It can be an endless process of discovery, a process to be appreciated for its difficulty. But, as Bronson reminds us, it is one of life's great dramas. That was a summary of What Should I Do With My Life by Po Bronson. We've explored the main currents of this incredible collection of stories today. But I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the major cities and the rivers, but it can't make you feel the warmth of the sun or hear the music in the streets. The real magic happens when you travel there yourself. This summary is meant to be your travel guide, to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If any of these stories have sparked something in you, if they've made you feel understood or given you a glimmer of hope, then I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about absorbing information. It's an experience, a conversation that can genuinely change the way you see your own path. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if this journey through these stories has brought you any value, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book here on Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep asking the big questions and growing together.